Joining us from Los Angeles now, Los Angeles, California, is Nomi Prins. Nomi is a journalist and senior fellow at Demos, and author of All the President's Bankers, The Hidden Alliances That Drive American Power. Thanks for joining us, Nomi.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you heard, I was saying just a couple of minutes ago, we're listening to MSNBC here. It's part of our thing tonight. We're watching corporate media back and forth. And they're talking about, for some vague reason, people just want change. People just want change. I was saying it's the economic policies of the Obama administration that gave us Donald Trump here. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I'm just sad. But, you know, the thing is, I've been writing about that for a really long time. And even recently, where I still thought that Hillary might win simply because that establishment is so entrenched. And here we have this sort of person who positions himself as an anti-establishment candidate, and he is from a political perspective. He's not from a financial perspective, but that's like a whole other thing we can go into in a second, or that we need to go into. But from the standpoint of Obama, Bill Clinton, Hillary, and so forth, we had a reshuffling for the last 25 years. The same, not just policies, but actual physical, real people that have gone through the Bill Clinton administration, through the Obama administration, and Hillary Clinton. So you take someone like, Robert Rubin, who was the Treasury Secretary for Bill Clinton. Now, of course, he went to Citigroup. When he was at Citigroup, who was working under him, not under him, but in one of the places in Citigroup that imploded, but Jack Lew. Jack Lew was the Assistant Secretary of Domestic Finance for Bill Clinton. He's a Treasury Secretary for Barack Obama. He became the Treasury Secretary after imploding an element of Citigroup that was bailed out, and after Hillary Clinton plucked him from Citigroup to become her Deputy Secretary of State. So it's the policies, it's the disgust at them, and even if you don't know these individuals' names, it's the revolving door that happens at the very, very top level of Washington and Wall Street.
Right, and then do talk a little bit about Trump as supposedly the person who's going to save the American working class.
Well, yeah, that's just odd anyway. I mean, here's the perception from the working class, and the working class has every right to be upset for what we just said from the Clinton side. And half the working class was supporting, I don't know half exactly, but supporting Sanders from the progressive side, supporting Donald Trump from the other side, but because they're economically fragile and worried. And so when you have a candidate who's promising that all the tricks, all the things that he did to make himself elevated over sort of the regular person, and he's even richer than Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, right? That he's somehow going to use that knowledge on behalf of the American people when he hasn't necessarily used that knowledge for even the people that work for him. I mean, besides his own family, we don't hear of stories, we haven't and we won't, from people who work for Trump who say, by the way, he helped me become a millionaire. He helped me, put things together. Here and there, yes, at the RNC and stuff. But I mean, real stories that have really happened over time, that hasn't been his thing. But we're supposed to feel that because he hasn't, for example, release his tax returns, which now he won't ever, because he gets to appoint the head of the IRS. So if you're appointing the head of the IRS and you haven't released your tax returns, well, that's not going to happen. But it also means that how he's done what he's done isn't going to be apparent. It's going to be it's going to be non-transparent. And yet the working person who voted for him, because of no alternative, and maybe because they liked him, one of those two things, or both of those two things, is stuck having to believe that somehow he's going to be better for them because he's decreed it, not because he has any necessary policies or a life that has shown that he will do that.
What do you, in terms of covering Trump's economic policy and such, not his shenanigans, of which there was some coverage, but what do you make of the media's coverage of what Trump's policy really means?
There hasn't been, first of all, there hasn't been a lot of detail on the policy, but what there has been is some of the stuff he says is kind of negate some of the other stuff he says. So he does talk about, having better trade agreements. I mean, that's been very front and center of, let's say, his economic policy. So trying to trade, we're talking about taxes, and we're talking about jobs, right? So in terms of the trade perspective, which he connects to jobs, the idea and what he has said has been that he'll negotiate better trade agreements. That's a kind of unilateral statement that obviously has played well throughout the country, because if you're sitting in the middle of a car town or something, or you're outside Detroit or wherever, and you've lost your job, and or you're insecure about what your future is going to be, and you see or feel or think your jobs are going away, and he's preyed upon that, then his policy will do that. But numerically, and this is where the media hasn't really done a good job, and it needs to, obviously, going forward, is when you say you have a policy where you're going to renegotiate trade ideas, which sounds good, we're going to win, we're not going to have other countries taking from us. You have to look at what exactly some of the good parts of those trade ideas are. And I'm not at all an advocate for NAFTA as a whole, but outside of NAFTA and individual trade agreements where there is a sharing of profits, say between auto workers in the United States and auto workers in Mexico, where you can actually design things that benefit both, where if you're not selling cars in one country, then those people in our country don't have the ability to manufacture them either. And so there's a connectivity that goes across some of the nations that he's been talking about as winning over us that he hasn't really addressed. And if he doesn't address that, then whatever he does to follow those trade policies is going to be negative on our country as well as those countries. So that's the kind of thing that hasn't been dug into. That's not a philosophical thing. That's just a numerical thing. That's like a money in, money out thing. It goes beneath the verbiage of it. In terms of the taxation, he's talking about reducing the taxes for corporations. That sounds good for corporations, and fining them if they don't give jobs in America. Well, that could be good if that actually happens, if he can actually do that. It's not something that you can do from the presidency, but there will be a Republican House. There will likely be a Republican Senate, and there might be things like that happen. But if he reduces the tax burden or tax requirements for corporations that are domiciled here but have all sorts of activities and profits on the outside, less money comes back into our country. If less money is coming back into our country, it has to be made up for in some other way, or our economy becomes more depressed. And so the analysis of his policies has to really look at both sides and not just how good they might sound and have sounded to the people that have voted for them, because it will be everyone, including those people whose economic condition could deteriorate on the back of how they transpire.
Right. Anybody here have some questions?
Well, I just think we have to go back and question this thesis that Obama delivered as Trump. Yeah, and then again, this is a personification. The crisis of capital occurred before, and I won't say on George Bush's watch, because it wasn't simply George Bush. It was accumulating over a long period of time. Now, Obama had a particular role, and this is where we have to educate people, is that when he had the majority in the House, he did not even try to build infrastructure. You're right.
And look at the finance team.
Right. Not only did he bail out U.S. banks, because capital is international, it's transnational. U.S. tax dollars also bailed out banks in Europe. But just to say that he delivered Trump, I think, is an oversimplification.
I'm talking about him representing a whole section. If you want, Clinton helped deliver Trump too, because it's the deregulation under the Clinton period.
Well, one could
And
say George
Obama
Bush
delivered more neoliberalism, and that's what
right.
that's why Wall Street financed him so lavishly to do so.
But George Bush administration delivered the crisis by just removing all regulations with Dick Cheney and all of those people that took him over. So I think
many of the states
war and cutting taxes.
But
Right.
Trump is winning this election to a large extent in states that Obama won.
Right.
The disillusionment with that Obama administration is not just from within Democrats. A lot of people that are voting Trump right now voted Obama last time.
Right, and I wouldn't argue that they voted Obama based on policy. I think this is a part of, they voted on humanism, the first black president, just as Hillary Clinton, she dropped that narrative that I'm going to be the first woman. These are the kinds of ideological alienation kinds of dimensions that the working class, the black community, we have all been sold. And Trump's line that black community, you're in as bad a shape as you've been, and then people say, well, this is not slavery. Well, that was really not the point. The fact of the matter is, statistically, the black community isn't bad. The policies have not, whether it was Republican or Democrat. So I think we, again, in calibrating the individual candidate over the crisis of the system, we've got to be a bit more refined in how we draw the
Nomi, you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, no, I mean that's certainly true. I am talking about the lineage from Bill Clinton through what could have been Hillary Clinton through Obama, because those individuals shared an ideology. Now they also share that ideology. It's fair, as you just pointed out. neoliberalism, but also with this idea that subsidizing, deregulating certain areas of the economy was somehow better competitively for the United States, and it would trickle down to an extent. Now, the concept of trickle down was something that happened, was coined verbally by Ronald Reagan, but the idea of deregulation is really an idea of trickle down. It's the idea of if we bundle up services across different types of financial institutions, and somehow that benefit's going to accrue to the individual who gets to go in and do his checking and do his asset management and do whatever it is he needs to do or she needs to do in one place. And that was kind of the sale of it. And the other sale of it was very much an international neoliberalistic type of sale, which Robert Rubin did, but he didn't do it alone. Don Regan did it under Ronald Reagan as a CEO for Merrill Lynch and so forth. So it's definitely a bipartisan thing. What's going to be an issue is whether or not Trump just said these things, or whether, because he has been a beneficiary of neoliberalism in every single manner. He's been a beneficiary from the standpoint of taxes. He's been a beneficiary from the standpoint of buying politicians, as he said, but really so that he can get subsidies for whatever he's done domestically. He has done the same thing internationally. He has money from his different that we know. This isn't about his taxes. This is from his FEC type of election information. In all sorts of places where it isn't coming back to the United States. So everything he says he's going to do is opposite from what he actually has done, and what he has done has been enabled partly because he had started out with some dough, but it's been enabled by the exact system that he says he's outside of.
Right.
And so that's an irony. Just like we got disillusioned, the country got disillusioned with the people who wanted Barack Obama to create change, and that's outside of being the first black president and bringing all of that to the position, and then being disillusioned that he didn't really create that change. Inequality is bigger. Everything has been a little bit destabilized, and a lot, depending on your perspective. And if you're not at the very top of the country, if you're not actually in the stock market, which is plummeting right now and will plummet on this information, result. These are things that are going to also disillusion people who have voted for Trump, because they love him or hate him, whether he's good or bad, whether he's crazy or sane. It doesn't matter, because if there's a situation, because what will happen is his policies are still going under the thing he is attacking, and how he has become who he is been predicated on the system he's attacking. So we're talking about somebody doing a 180 on their entire life at the age of 70, just because they said they would. And just because you get to the White House and you have everybody else around you who believes in those same doctrines doesn't mean you can anyway.
Right. Just to make things a little grimmer for those who are not fans of Donald Trump, it was only a few weeks ago that 7 leading climate scientists said that if every country lives up to their entire pledge at the Paris agreements, we are still going to hit 2 degrees of warming in 34 years by 2050. It wasn't long ago everyone thought that was going to be the end of the century. Now it's 34 years away. We're now going to have perhaps a House, a President, and maybe a Senate that wants to rip up the Paris Accords, never mind take it a little further. Annabelle, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, because I have to get going, but I just want to leave you guys with a thought. First of all, majority of this country now identify as independents,
Right.
because they don't feel at home in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, and they're the swing voters. They're the ones who voted Obama in. They're the ones voting for Trump right now, right? And so I think a lot of those people are just feeling like the parties have failed, the system has failed, and they've been this way, and it's a growing number. So there's that. I mean, I think that every campaign, if they're going to be successful, has to present a coherent, compelling story about America. And Clinton failed to do that. We don't know what her story is. We don't know what her vision is. It seemed to me like I would ask people at the DNC, at her campaign, well, what is her story? And even the staff members couldn't really tell me. And it seems like the subtext is, well, what has happened to America in the last 8 years is good enough. So you should just vote for more of it, And it's very attractive for somebody like Trump to come along and say, no, this is all wrong, and we're going to fix it. And so the thought I want to leave you with is, it's not just about alienation. It's about who gets to blame, who are the villains in the story? Who's really at fault here? Right? And I think a lot of the progressives and liberals and Democrats have, for a while, have wanted to identify white, conservative, rural America as the problem. And that's one of the story elements that they want to reject. They don't want to be the villains of the story anymore. And this is why it's so important for us to have a dialogue and discussion that includes the rural America, and not just talk to each other, not just talk to people in blue dots. We've got to talk to people outside the blue dots if we're going to change America, And so anyway, so that's my, I guess, passion, and I just want to leave you with that thought.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Nomi, you want to respond to that?
No, it's a beautiful thought. I mean, one thing, and I was saying this before, whether you are someone who voted for Trump or someone who would have voted for Sanders, the idea was to vote for outside of someone who's just saying, I got this because it's been okay, and I'll make it fine. I mean, the inauthenticity of Hillary Clinton, simply because of where she was positioned, her ideology, her history, everything she has said and done. And it was interesting what I said about her staff not even knowing where she was on any one matter. I mean, the WikiLeaks Podesta email showed us a lot of those elements where, even something as that didn't really hit the campaign, like drug companies too much, and what the price could be, and if it could be capped and so forth, was an issue that her staffers were like, I think she can go with this, but can she? Everything was this conversation about what might look good as opposed to an internal conviction, and that's something that voters, obviously reacted to, and not being passionate for her. And if you're going to come across lines, though, the passion has to come from actually wanting to work together and see each other's side, and also not isolate different groups of people from each other. I mean, that is something that Trump really did talk about a lot during the campaign, and hopefully, as president, he will realize that, you don't want to alienate such large swaths of your country, and maybe it was a strategy to get in, and you can go across those lines. I mean, that would be a good result.
All right, well, thanks very much for joining us, Nomi.
Thank you.